Paddington's back, the Brown family are back. This time they're in Paddington's home turf of the Peruvian jungle for a whole new adventure. And I'll tell you right now, it is the worst Paddington film. Well, least best Paddington film. It's a big step down from 2. And I think the biggest reason for that is Paul King, director of 1 and 2. He did not come back for this film, and you really do feel his absence because the pace and the energy is just not quite there like it was in 1 and 2. In 1 and 2, just the directing, the execution, it was just constantly on point throughout the whole film. It was just firing on all cylinders. In Paddington 3, Paddington in Peru, there were times where just the heart didn't feel like it was there, directorially speaking, and there were patches where it started to kind of drag a little bit. I feel like I'm attacking this film right out the gate, so let me rein it in and say Paddington 3 is not a bad film. It's certainly watchable. The kids in the cinema I was in seemed to be really enjoying it. They were panicking at moments of peril, and there's definitely some enjoyment and some moments of heart in there. Absolutely there is. Paddington himself is still a really endearing character. He's still charmingly clumsy and just all around a beacon of hope, positivity, and just good in the world. And I love seeing that character back in a new film. Generally speaking, I liked the Peruvian jungle setting and those adventure vibes they go for. I like seeing Paddington running away from the boulder, all Raiders of the Lost Ark style. But I think it all comes down to the directing. I don't know who directed this film, Douglas something or other. I feel like he didn't approach this film and these characters with the same love that Paul King did in 1 and 2. It kind of feels like he approached this film as a standard family film and executed it accordingly. And the first 2 films definitely had a lot of cliches and a lot of formulaic stuff, but Paul King just elevated it with a whole bunch of wonderful stuff. It's just not the same thing with Paddington 3, unfortunately. Another disappointment in this film was the baddie. Paddington 1 and 2 had really good, memorable bad guys. Nicole Kidman in 1 and Hugh Grant in 2, who was amazing. In Paddington 3, there really isn't a bad guy until the end of the film, and then it's just for a quick 2-minute scene. So that was a bummer. I would have liked to have seen a really memorable, awesome scene-stealing bad guy throughout the entire film like 1 and 2 had. And something that I just think needs to be addressed is the Mrs. Brown recasting. Sally Hawkins, who played Mrs. Brown so wonderfully in the first 2 films, unfortunately is not back for this one, and we have Emily Mortimer as Mrs. Brown this time, and she's a fine choice for Mrs. Brown. She's good, she's likable. If she played Mrs. Brown from the start, she'd have been a good choice for the character all along, but she's not nearly as good as Sally Hawkins was, and it's one of those recast scenarios where every time the character's on screen, you just can't help but see the new actor. So yeah, Paddington 3, Paddington in Peru is the least best Paddington film by a considerable margin. But again, it's still a decent family film. You'll enjoy it if you take the kids to see it. There is some good moments of heart and humor and enjoyment. I'll say this actually, there is a scene at the end of this film that is actually really damn heartwarming. I was like, okay, who's cutting onions all of a sudden? This scene felt like it was directed by Paul King, and it was great. I just wish that it was like that through the whole film. I'll sum it up like this. Paddington 1 and 2 were exceptional. Paddington 3, it was fine.